All right, we are also going to cover using Popen, and Popen allows you to pipe commands together, and Popen is also able to run things asynchronously. So we've covered pipes somewhat briefly previously when we discussed some of the basics of the command line, but let's say we wanted to filter to a specific country, but we didn't want to have all 100 of those lines. Let's say we wanted to have the three first lines or the first 5 lines or something like that. So we can do that by combining 2 utilities. One is the grep command, and then the other is the head command. And so what head does is it allows you to specify, I only want the first X lines of a file. And so you can do that by using this -3. You can do -1, you can do -50, and you can specify exactly how many lines you want, the first 50 lines of the file. Tail is something similar. You can also use tail in order to specify the last X number of lines in a file. So what I've done is I've combined 2 utilities. I've taken the output of the grep command and I've used that as the input of the tail command or the input of the header command. And so this is possible because of this thing called pipe that allows you to connect these things together. So you pipe the data from one command to the input of the other command. And so this is also possible in Python, but in order to do that you have to use Popen. And so the reason you have to use Popen is because you have to, one, be able to run these things asynchronously, kind of at the same time. So the idea is that you're grepping this, and if this was a huge file, grep would run, but as soon as grep found a line, it would output this to the other function, it would output it to the other command, and then head would run it kind of simultaneously. So you don't want to wait for the output of grep before you run head. You want to run these processes simultaneously. And so run would not allow you to do that. The way run works is it runs one command, waits until it finishes, and then goes to the next line. So this is probably a little bit confusing, so maybe what we'll do is just do a quick example of how you can get this to work. And I will show you kind of what I just did right here. So now I've managed to capture the first 3 lines of a file, and I was able to store this in this output variable. So again, we use grep to get the Algeria lines of the world demographics file, and then we used head in order to return the first 3 of those. So how did I do this? So now I have 2 lines of code, 1 for each command I want to run. So you'll notice that I have a line of code for the grep command, and I have a line of code for the head command. So this is a little bit different from the command line where you put this all together. So the left side and the right side of the pipe are now separate lines. So Popen, the first argument of Popen is very similar to run. So we have a list, and the elements are the name of the command followed by the arguments. And so this is also true of the head, so the name of it, and then the argument was -3. So now we are specifying what we want to do with standard out. So standard out is equal to subprocess.pipe. So subprocess includes something that acts like a pipe. So if we were at the command line, we would have printed something like this. But the version that Python supplies is called this subprocess.pipe. So the syntax is different, but the idea is pretty similar. And so what we've done here is we first created a process, and we specified that we want the output of grep to go into the pipe. Now for the second, we run another process, and now we're actually specifying where the data is coming from. So the data, this head command needs to be able to read, the head command is able to read data from the standard in, and so we're specifying that this command should take in data, and we're specifying where we want it to take in data. So we're saying use the p1.standardout as the input for this. And then finally, we again send the standard out to this subprocess.pipe, okay? And the reason for this, the reason that we do this is that this is how we capture the data. So we have to do this with Popen, so there's no, you can't use capture output equals true for the Popen. Unfortunately, in order to capture the output, you have to send it to the pipe. And then finally, we run this output.p2.communicate. And so this specifies, what the communicate does is it specifies to wait until this process has run completely. And so this process won't complete until P1 gets all of its data, sends it to the pipe, and then all of this data is analyzed by this. And so now we're able to run it, and so both of these arguments have completely run. And so now if I look at the output, and I unfortunately ran this twice, now I have managed to capture it. So this is also a little bit confusing. This object is actually, that is returned, is actually a tuple, where the first element of the tuple is the standard out, and then the second element is the standard error. So if you want to access this data, you have to specify I want the standard out, and then in this case you have to use that decode command in order to convert it to a string. Now we can use our string abilities in order to process this data, etc. And so just kind of following what we did before, we can also process this data to get exactly what we wanted. All right, so we have gone over some of the basics of using subprocess to run things at the command line. And so this allows you to take advantage of, hundreds to thousands of programs, command line programs that have been written by other people. And now you can run them in Python in a Python script. So this is a great way, for example, to create workflows or to create pipelines where you link, a bunch of commands together to process data that you want to. So, this is, using Python is one way to kind of keep a record of how you process your data. So instead of, typing things out at the command line and then you kind of forget how you did these, you just create a Python script where you use subprocess to run all the commands you want, and now you know how to get that data and analyze that data. And just kind of like one final example of, let's see. So let's say I tried to grep a file that didn't exist. encoding. You can also test to see whether or not a function ran successfully. So now you'll notice, for example, that the return code is equal to 2 instead of 0, and you'll also notice that there is no standard out, but there is standard error. And so that's another way you can actually go and test whether or not your command ran successfully. So you really have a lot of abilities to do lots of different things in using subprocess, and it's really a useful tool for writing scripts.